Hello and welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, your daily go-to source for decoding current affairs with clarity and UPSC relevance. It's June 27th and today's edition highlights two pressing issues shaping India's development and climate landscape. Firstly, we unpack the World Bank report on abject poverty in India, a data-backed reality check and its policy implications. Next, we explore Asia on the boil based on the recent WMO report, understanding the regional climate crisis and what it means for adaptation strategies. Our simplified articles for prelims 2026 cover a diverse mix from India's vaccination efforts to political party classifications in the country. So, let's begin. Hi everyone, I hope you all are doing well. I hope your preparation is going fine. Welcome back again to another interesting session of the Analyst. Now here, Mains 2025 is just around the corner, and that is why we have two most important topics today. Firstly, on abject or extreme poverty levels in the country. Secondly, we have one major important article on climate change. Now, firstly, we will be focusing on the recent World Bank report on Indian poverty levels. Mainly the World Bank has focused on the extreme poor population of the country. As you know, according to development economics, we cannot only have the category of poorer classes of the population. Within poorer classes of the population, we have further a subsection of the poorer sections which are known as extreme poor. Now, we will be focusing our discussions mainly on the poorer sections and the extreme poor populations of the country, mainly in the backdrop of the World Bank report. Now, this World Bank report has told us that extreme poverty levels as a section of the population has fallen down to 5.75%, according to 27% in 2011 and 12. But the main topic of the discussion is that whether this figure is actually the real picture or not. So from the perspective of prelims, from economic and social development, and from the perspective of GS 2 and 3, extremely important for this year's mains examination, we have to discuss about the various aspects of poverty, issues related to growth and development where we have the topic of poverty within this, and finally, we have to also mention about the inclusive growth in the country. Now, when we talk about this topic, let me tell you in the very beginning, I know that poverty, its estimation, the various degrees of poverty in the country, the various data and statistics are extremely confusing. Even sometimes I get confused when I talk about the various reports and the various data which you also will be aware of right now. Now, when we talk about the estimation of poverty or how poverty is measured, it was covered in the first week of June in the previous analyst session itself. So you can go and watch about the basics of poverty, how they are measured in the country and the various other aspects. What I am going to focus today is actually on the definition of poverty line, how the poverty line concepts in the country and the various data has changed over a period of time, and what are the various issues that we have to keep in mind. Now let me start with a very basic concept of what defines a poverty line. Now we all know that poverty line is actually the basic threshold that a person needs to earn to have a basic dignified life. Now these very words, basic and dignified lives, are extremely subjective. Why? Let me tell you. Because, according to the various commissions in the country which were commissioned to measure poverty in the country, the two most important ones are the Tendulkar Committee and the C. Rangarajan Committee. Now, Tendulkar Committee, now these are all according to 2011 and 2012 poverty levels. Now, the Tendulkar Committee told that if any person is earning 33 rupees per day in urban areas and 27 rupees a day in rural areas, or any person is earning actually below those levels, they are known as suffering from poverty, or they are actually below this line, below this poverty line. Now, the government back then, when it commissioned the Suresh Tendulkar Committee recommendations, the governments over the period of time were not exactly happy with this figure. Because according to that, the Indian poverty levels will be coming at 21.9% in 2011, which according to various economics and experts, this figure was actually very low. So that is why the C. Rangarajan Committee was again commissioned, which now told that any person who is earning below 47 rupees per day in urban areas and 30 rupees per day in rural areas would be extremely poor or below the poverty line. That is attributing to around 20, 30, almost 30% of the total Indian population. So this was the percentage of people who were extremely poor or below the poverty line. So that is how this concept of poverty line is extremely important, and we have also understood that over a period of time how the perspective from the government side have changed. Now, when we talk about why we have the poverty line here, because the government of the day, you know that because our Indian government and also the various governments all across the world who are democratic, they want good for the people, they want to have various welfare schemes for the poor sections. They have to launch various anti-poverty policies such as housing policies, such as sanitation, immunizations and so on. We have to also understand how India is performing at an international level with reference to various other countries. We know that being the largest country in the world in respect of population, we need to actually check how we are actually faring with other countries at the international level. And also, when we talk of the poverty line, there are various peculiar problems here. Firstly, when we talk about some particular levels per day, per rural or urban areas, are we not simplifying this data? Are we not talking about the various urban laborers and the rural laborers? Within the urban laborers, there are several classes of different occupations, who do not have that amount of potential to earn their incomes, right? So maybe this is oversimplifying the poverty levels for uniformly for all the peoples in that particular state, correct? Also, based on various states and regions, the poverty levels can vary, because you cannot simply tell that a person who is poor in Mumbai is exactly at the same level with reference to a person who is earning their incomes in the northeastern states. So definitely there would be differences across regionals, and at the end of the day we need to also keep in mind the relative deprivation, because the relative deprivation with reference to the poorer classes, the extreme poorer classes, and when you compare the same with the middle income classes, these class differences are also there. That is why poverty levels or poverty lines sometimes are not accurate in cases of various instances where we need to undertake various policy measures. We need to recommend some things for the poorer sections. So that is where we have to encapsulate these concepts here. Now, when we talk about the international comparisons, so here the World Bank comes into picture. Now, World Bank has actually calculated, when we talk about the World Bank section A data, now World Bank has told that 21.2% of Indians are actually below the poverty levels, because they have calculated $1.25 per day as their poverty line. Now again there is a problem here. There are no rural or urban differences here. Now we also have to compare various regions in the country. That is also not there. But nevertheless, in the part B data, later on the World Bank told that okay, the expenditure of $1.9 per day will be the poverty line. They have come to the conclusion that we have around 12.4 percentage of the Indian population below the poverty line. Now, when we are talking about these dollars, are we talking about the market exchange rates? No, we are not talking exactly about the market exchange rates, because we have to talk about the same baskets of goods and services that you can purchase in India, and with the same baskets of goods and services that you can actually get the same in the US or the various Western countries or in any other countries. For that, you have to take the purchasing power parity. Now, according to purchasing power parity, recently, as of June 2025, the World Bank again revised this $1.9 per day data to $3 per day. And in PPP terms, that is around 62 rupees per day. Not that 85 rupees into 3, which is the market exchange rate, approximately as of now. According to PPP exchange rate, we are calculating 62 rupees per day. Now, so far, we have seen the Tendulkar Committee, Rangarajan Committee and some of the World Bank recommendations, which are actually India's own poverty lines. Whenever we talk about the government of India, talking about what is the exact percentage of poorer sections of the population or the sections of the population below the poverty line, the government will be looking at the Tendulkar Committee recommendations. It will be looking at the World Bank calculation of the poverty levels. But here, there are so many figures that will leave you confused right now. But for simplification, just imagine this thing, that according to Tendulkar methodology, that calculated that India, was around having 21.9 percentage of the population below the poverty level. Right now, if we re-verify it, according to the various recent studies conducted by a noted economics by JNU, known as Dr. Himanshu, he calculated that according to that same Tendulkar methodology, we would get around 10% extreme poverty in the country right now. Now, he again calculated the same for the Rangarajan committee recommendation of 30% back in 2011. That would translate to right now 12.2%. Now, you will tell that poverty has decreased. Obviously, poverty has decreased. We are not telling that poverty is not decreasing over a period of time. The government over the days have taken so many policy reforms, starting from the housing schemes, the sanitation schemes, income support schemes, the Manrega schemes, the MSP. There are so many, governmental welfare schemes. Also, the World Bank data, right, for abject poverty line for low income countries, that is $3 per day that we discussed right now, which the World Bank has declared in June 2025. According to that, we have around 5 to 5.75% of the most poorer sections of the population. Also, the World Bank has also released a new figure for the lower middle income countries, that is $4.2 per day, right, which the World Bank did not prescribe for India. Now, the World Bank told that according to that, if we were applying that yardstick, if we were applying $4.2 per day, that means it is the poverty line in the country. If that would be the case, then we would have had around 23.9% of the people below the poverty line. Again, consider another case, the World Bank's latest poverty line for upper middle income countries. If we were following this figure, that means if we would consider that India is having a poverty line of $8.3, that is around 171 rupees per day, which makes quite a sense because of the recent living standards in the country. That would mean that 82% of the population is actually below the poverty line, right? So this is where we have to keep in mind the data that we are choosing. Data can be extremely dangerous. Just consider this data here. The Bhalla and Bhasin study, which took $1.9 a day, which we also saw earlier. That would mean that we have only 2% extreme poverty levels in the country. How this is possible at all? For the same poverty line, we are having multitudes of data. Don't worry, you do not have to remember all of this. You just have to remember the recent World Bank, poverty line for India, that is $3 a day, which translates into 5.75%. Now, you need to remember that these data is right now flawed. Correct? So, more on this in the next slide. Now, India, on its part, it has another way of measuring poverty too. That is the Niti Aayog's own multi-dimensional poverty report. Now, multi-dimensional poverty says that we do not only have to consider the incomes of the people, not only how much they are earning per day, that is obviously important. After that, we have to look at various other indicators. This is actually the index which was inspired by the Oxford's version of the same on the multidimensional poverty index. So that goes beyond income levels. That also looks into the access that the people has to cooking fuel, housing, nutrition, sanitation, maternal health, years of schooling and various other factors. In the comments, you can tell me what are the various other indicators this Niti Aayog's multidimensional poverty index is looking at. So it goes beyond incomes, and it has reported that as of 2019 and 21, between this time, the poverty, the extreme poverty in the country is 24.9%. And here, when we talk about the multidimensionally poor sections of the population in this report, that means that all of these peoples are actually devoid of these facilities, plus they also have lower incomes. Also, when we look at the same, we see that the states of Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh have actually improved when we talk about the number of people they have helped escape poverty or extreme poverty. We can also look the same in the map here. Now, to the main thing here. This data of 5.75%, which the World Bank is telling that if you are earning less than $3 in the country, you are extreme poor, which is same for the urban and the rural parts. Now, don't you think that this is an illusion? Because what we are talking about 62 rupees per day. Now, is this a joke? Can you even survive this in 2025? Because 62 rupees, when we consider in 2022, if you can look at this figure, the price of 1 liter Amul milk is 63 rupees. Now you know in India how important the consumption of milk is for several sections of the population. Right? And when we talk about the various data contradictions, as we have seen, according to this recent estimation, we have 5.75. According to various other lower income middle classification of the World Bank, we get 24%. Also, when we look at various other economists and their studies, we get from 2% to even 80% of poverty in the country. So everything is contradicting here. Now, when we look at various other contradictions, we also know that in the recent budget, what the government has done, up to 12.75 lakh rupees per year, if your income is within this bracket, you need not pay effective income taxes. Right, you are exempt from Indian, income taxes, which attribute to around 96% of the people who are actually liable to pay income taxes. So you are excluding so many people, but you are telling that the actual official figures is only at 5.75%. That is 62 rupees per day. That means if you are giving income tax exemptions, that means those people generally need that assistance. Right? If you are saving them taxes, you generally want them to pay for their education, health services, some basic EMIs for house loans and so on. Also, when we talk about the most important government scheme, in my opinion, in the country, it is a National Food Security Program. Now, we know that how we have various benefits under the same. So, it is covering around 66% of the entire population in the country. So, if you are giving benefits to around 66% of the population in terms of free food, that means they genuinely need that, right? If you are a government, right, according to various economists, if you are a government and if you are providing this many services, so this means that these populations generally need this support. Next, when we talk about 83% Indians, they earn less than 171 rupees per day. Right, they earn below this level. That means it translates to 5,130 rupees per month. Imagine this surviving in Mumbai for a family of 2, 3 or 4. You can only imagine the nightmare. Right, according to the World Bank, this should be the classification for upper middle income countries, which India is not actually qualifying for according to World Bank's data. But we have to understand that in India, the living costs for various services, if you want to have a respectable living standard in the country, you need to earn this much amount and even more, maybe 2-3 times more, to even provide for your family, for your parents. Also, the government spends 4 lakh crore rupees per year for free food. That means this is another contradiction. Next, also we see that the Manrega demand is at a very high level right now. That means people are unemployed, people are not getting jobs. That means they are going to casual labor. That means they are going to unskilled labor for 100 days in the rural areas. So, and at the end of the day, we also have various rural escapees. The rural escapees are generally those population who do not get jobs in the rural sections and they go on to the urban areas and there they become the urban poor. So that is why we have to now understand why there is so much of disagreement over this data, why there is so much of contradictions, because firstly we do not have updated Indian poverty line from the perspective of the government of India, because there is actually the tendency in recent times where the government of India is actually using the World Bank's data for the various poverty schemes in the country. So this means there is an official silence. The consumption expenditure survey for 10 plus years is not being properly conducted in a transparent manner, and that is leading to poor tracking of the real household budgets, which is leading to official silence for these poverty levels. Also, different methodologies are confusing the various policymakers, even the economists. You have seen how they have given 2% to around 80% when we talk about just the poverty lines. Right? We have wild figures right now in the country, and also the multidimensional poverty index do not have income data properly fitted with it. So it relies on the external agencies here. Next, we also have the political pressure. According to various critics, they say that there is a political pressure to downplay poverty levels, because obviously if you are the ruling government, you do not want to show that the poverty levels in the country is decreasing at a very slow pace, especially after the COVID pandemic, where even according to various economists, the poverty levels increased. And at the end of the day, the World Bank shifting benchmarks. We have just seen they have so many confusing parameters for various countries, for low income countries, for middle income countries, for upper middle income countries, and so on. So even when we talk about that, in 1970s, talk about 1970s, which was around 50 years, more than 50 years from now, it was around $1 per day when we talk about the poverty line. But right now it has increased by $2 in around 50 years only. So don't you think that the increase must be more? So this is where we have to understand what we need to do right now. Firstly, we need to conduct various surveys. Mainly, we have to conduct properly the consumption expenditure surveys in a very transparent manner. The NSO needs to be involved here. Also, we need to factor in inflation right now, because if you look at the World Bank shifting benchmarks, maybe they forgot inflation, right? They forgot to calculate inflation here. Next, when we talk about the vulnerability, how actually a person is prone to become poor, apart from the access to health, education, and so on, we must be moving closer to the multidimensional poverty index, which we should be expanding with various other parameters also, such as nutrition, access to digital economy, which they have also done as of now, but we need to include more parameters. And at the end of the day, we need to have a real-time tracking of the wages and the inflation, particularly affecting the casual laborers and the women labor force in the country. So this will be translating into better figures, more accurate figures. Till that time, you mention the answers of these PYQs in the comments below, followed by your attempt to this mains practice question in the comments, so that we can actually have a chance to see whether you are writing answers or not. Right? As an introduction, you can quote some figures, even you can draw some diagrams in your mains answers. Also, 2015 question of the mains is actually talking about what we discussed right now. So have a look. You can attempt either of them in the comments. Now on to the next one. Looks like that we will be reading reports today, because we have another report coming from the WMO, which actually releases various reports on the climate change. Now here we are talking about the Asian region, which according to the WMO is warming twice as fast more than the global average, which is actually a cause of concern, because we know it is the largest continent and also we are present here. And when we talk about the relevance of the syllabus, we have environmental concepts in prelims. When we talk about GS3, we need to talk about environmental pollution, degradation, and basically climate change. So when we talk about Asia and how this report focuses only on Asia here, we need to firstly understand that the world is at stake due to climate change. We know that the Paris Agreement warned us that even if the global warming reaches 1.5 degrees Celsius, there will be catastrophic impacts on the entire world. And that is why we have to prevent the increase of temperature, global temperatures, by 1.5 degrees by 2030. So this is a limit that we must be as a global community adhering, that any rise of global temperatures must not be going beyond this. If it is going beyond that, we have to limit the rise by 2 degrees Celsius by 2050. If at all we see the global temperatures rising beyond this degree, there could be catastrophic destruction all across the world. And some of the evidences we are already seeing that the global temperature is already breaching 1.5 degree rise. How? Because when we talk about Asia, which is actually having the largest land mass, the land mass is hitting more at a rapid rate than the oceans. Right? Now this is a very cause of concern, because when we talk about the oceanic rise of temperature, that is around 0.24 degrees per decade, which is actually more than the global average even. The marine heat waves mainly are fueling various conditions of floods, typhoons, cyclones in the say oceanic regions of the Asian continent, because we have to understand this all are various atmospheric conditions which are fueled by hotter oceans. And if our seas and oceans are hotter, the land is also affected via these natural disasters. Also in India, we have seen how the erratic monsoons have taken place, right? Also due to heavy and excessive rainfall, we are seeing flash floods which took place right now in Himachal Pradesh. We also have so many incidents of landslides, and most importantly during the summers we have heat waves. Now all of this can be linked to this land ocean nexus. And this is why we have to also appreciate this contribution of the melting of the glacier systems of the Mekong river, of the Ganga river, of the Brahmaputra river, right, where it is carrying more of the glacier melt from their sources. And when we have more glacier melt, we mean that we are actually declining or decreasing the salinity of the oceans, and this decrease in salinity will be leading to lots of local weather conditions, which are extreme weather events, which can also be looked at in this map here. When we talk about the entire world, right, we have Asia region, which is most vulnerable to the extreme weather events according to the World Risk Index 2024. For your mains, you can actually draw these diagrams and you can actually shade the regions, noting down actually the potential regions. Now, when we talk about another report which was released recently by the Energy Institute, which was a report which is mainly focusing on why we have this rise of global temperatures, right? Mainly it has focused on the energy sectors and the carbon dioxide emissions which are emanating from the energy sector. So what are the key findings? Firstly, they found the most important thing, that the fossil fuel is actually supplying 82% of the global energy, and mostly it is concentrated in the developing regions of the Asian continent. When we talk about 82% of the global energy being fueled by fossil fuels, then what were we doing all this renewable energy for? When we are talking about expanding the solar energy, wind energy, they are translating to only 18% of the global energy supply, despite so much heavy investments in this. Why? Because the Western countries and the various oil supplying countries, they simply do not want to diversify beyond that. And these have had various negative consequences. For example, firstly, the global average temperature has exceeded 1.5 degrees Celsius, as I told before. Now, this is the first full year breach of the Paris threshold. As we know, it was actually one of the Paris climate deal agreements and the goals that we have to limit the rise by 1.5 degrees of increasing global temperature by 2030, which we have already breached. The global energy supply increased by 2%, and for the first time, all sources like oil, gas, coal, hydro, renewable, nuclear have increased together. All of them has increased together, and they have increased by 2%. Right? And this is a very cause of concern, because when we talk about the energy related CO2 emissions, this rose by 1%, right, around 1% to 40.8 gigaton of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions. That means we have so many global warming potential gases apart from CO2. So if we combine all of them, they have 40.8 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions, which is a new global record, because the fossil fuel growth for gas, coal has all increased, and here gas saw the fastest growth, while we can tell that maybe the gas fuel power plants or gas fueled appliances are less polluting than fossil fuels like petrol and various other types, but still it is a fossil fuel nevertheless. When we talk about the wind and solar growth, it is only at 16% year on year, but when we talk about the same, it is 9x faster than the total energy demand. Now, why at all this all negative consequences are happening? In the recent times, there are some reasons, right? You can actually quote this in the mains, because the recent things you quote, the more relevance it has for the examiners. So firstly, we have the geopolitical energy shifts, mainly via the conflicts in Russia and Ukraine, or the Middle East crisis that we have seen in West Asia, via the tensions that we have around the Strait of Hormuz. So these all tensions are failing. There's speculation that maybe in the near future the world will be becoming more fragmented. So right now the countries are demanding more of crude oil, more of fossil fuels, just to keep their countries running and store more of them in their countries. Next, we also have supply side challenges. When we talk about the solar and wind systems, when we talk about India's own required capacity, we need this much, and as of current we have only this, because there are some challenges. Because if we want to expand the solar parks in the country, the wind power parks in the country, we need to convert more farmlands into solar parks. We need to cut down the forest and affect the biodiversity, and finally our water and food security may be at stake. So we have the food versus fuel debate again here, right? And next we have some mixed signals, because at popular climate conferences, all of the countries are very happy to tell that, okay, I will be giving this amount, I will be if I'm a rich country, I will be contributing this amount for the betterment of the entire world when we talk about the climate change. But at COP28 in 2023 in Dubai, the entire world committed of tripling the renewables by 2030. You know what happened? According to the various fossil fuel subsidies which are given in the Western economies that amount to $7 trillion, right? They are actually contradicting their earliest promises. Now, in 2024, according to IMF data, $7 trillion worth of fossil fuel subsidies were given just as an hedge against inflation, which was going around from 2022 to 2023 around the entire world. So, lots of subsidies were given just to tame inflation by the government. Now, when we talk about aspirations of the entire people, mainly of the Asian region, we have to understand we are home to China, India, Vietnam, various other Southeast Asian nations. So the living standards in these countries are increasing over a period of time, and the higher incomes, the more demand for goods and services will be. Higher incomes means you are buying more houses, which leads to a lot of emissions in the construction sector. You are buying more cars, maybe you are buying cheaper cars, you are not buying EVs because they are still costly right now. You are actually focusing on lifestyle such as you are roaming around in flights instead of traveling by trains. You are buying your own car and not going via the public transport. So what happens when a country is actually developing, right? It actually means that there will be more environmental destruction. When a country has reached a developed stage, that means the country is right now focusing on sustainable livelihood, sustainable ways of commute or transportation or urbanization and so on, which we see generally in the Western countries. Countries in Asia, when we talk about the environmental Kuznets curve, are initially very deprived on the environmental sections when their incomes are rising, right? Their environmental pollution also rises. So as and when they develop more, their environmental pollution goes down. And also, increasingly we are adopting Western lifestyle standards, which we know as usually is already much more polluted. And finally, when we talk about the recent events such as the COVID crisis and the subsequent push for energy security after the COVID pandemics, lockdowns were removed, we saw, especially from China and India, an increasing amount of coal demand, because the world was shut down for a long period of time and suddenly we needed energy to fuel our industries, and that impact is still right now. So, what would be the consequences if this trend continues? According to various reports, by 2030, there will be 2.7 degrees of global warming. And do you know what it translates to? Take the case scenario of 1.5 degree rise and 2 degree rise. So if we have 1.5 degree rise, we will be having ice-free Arctic summers once every 100 years, right? Which is actually a cause of concern. But if there is a 2 degree rise, Arctic will be ice-free once every 10 years, right? So there will be having, a catastrophic destruction on species such as polar bears and various other biodiversity in the region. Next, also when we talk about the heat waves, if there is a 2 degree rise, 37% of the population will be exposed to heat waves every 5 years. Fisheries catches will be declining more if there is a 2 degree rise. Plants will be losing half their length and their range if there is a 2 degree rise by 16%. Insects will be also losing the same. Also, when we talk about the same, across the difference between land and the oceanic temperatures, the gradient will be kind of becoming same. And for greater stability, for environmental stability, for atmospheric stability in geographical conditions, we need some differences between land and oceanic temperatures. Otherwise, these monsoons, these typhoons and those cyclones will be becoming more erratic, and they will be causing more damages, obviously, along developing countries, but more so in the island countries, which are the least income countries in the entire world. And they have nowhere to go if there is a sea level rise. So that is why we firstly need to focus on what India is doing to prevent those things. Because by 2070, India has agreed that okay, we will be becoming net zero. While there was a criticism that the entire world is thinking of transitioning by 2050, but since we are a developing country with the largest population in the entire world, we need to have some extra time. So firstly, we have identified some headers such as renewable energy, coal phase down and various other things, and we are taking measures within the same. For example, firstly, when we are talking about the various strides, we are doing another renewable energy section. We have already achieved 200 gigawatts, that is around 45% of the capacity by 2024. Also, India is actually having one of the world's largest solar parks, such as the Bharatiya solar park and various other parks too. In the comments, you can mention some of the more recent solar parks which were in the news. Extremely important for your prelims and mains information. Next, we also have the green hydrogen mission to have more production of green hydrogen via renewable energy such as solar energies. When we talk about the coal phase down or reduction of the coal technologies, right, we are right now doing a transition toward the greener fuels. For example, we are thinking of having CCUS or carbon capture utilization storage. So we are actually trying to capture the excess carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and transforming that into our own industrial processes. For example, the ONGC is planning 9 million metric tons of CO2 capture by 2038. We also have the gas-based transition where the thermal power plants in the countries are thinking of transitioning from coal to gas-based. Still they're polluting, still they're fossil fuels, but they're much less polluting than the coal-based ones. When we talk about the mobility sectors, the transportation sector, electrification and green mobility is in our minds. So firstly, we are thinking about having 100% rail electrification by 2030. Also in India, we are having the EV revolution where 80% of the new 2 or 3 wheeler vehicles in the country are actually electric. Also on the other side, we have the biofuel program where we are thinking of blending ethanol into petrol. You let me know in the comments what is the target. And at the end of the day, we also have the PM E-Drive scheme, which is to promote more production of electric vehicles, electric ambulances, electric trucks in the country. Also, the carbon sinks and afforestation is on the minds of the government because there is a forest cover target that we have to achieve of 33%, which we are trying to achieve via the Green India mission and using the CAMPA funds. Taking help from the private sector here because CAMPA funds is actually taking money from the private sector in cases of any project that the private sectors are doing on forested areas and clearing those areas. So they have to compensate the clearing of the forest via financial compensation or having more land where they are actually having afforestation. And at the end of the day, we are also having 91 Ramsar wetland sites, right, in the country. And finally, when we talk about the Indian strides in climate finance and policy, we have the sovereign green bonds which invests in green projects in the country. We also have the carbon market which is slated for the launch in 2026, where we can actually trade credits, where the industry can actually participate to trade their credits. Now, apart from this, we need to talk about some solutions. Firstly, when we talk about the resilience that we have to build right now, we have to have heat resistant cities with proper planning to reduce the urban heat island effect that we are seeing right now, which is increasing the more consequences of the heat waves. We need to have climate proof farms by including technologies such as artificial intelligence to reduce the water wastage. We need to develop proper early warning systems such as SMSs, such as alerts, such as using satellites for easy amount of detection of any erratic weather conditions. Now these are all the things that we have to talk about when we talk about mitigating the disasters. Also, for long-term planning, we need climate finance where the developed countries must right now give what they have promised, that is $100 billion per year. Also, the infrastructure such as public transport, rail over road, such as using proper amount of trams that we also discussed previously in the urban areas, which can actually significantly reduce the pollution in the entire urban areas, that can be of immense help. Also, when we talk about sufficiency corridors, we need to, on our daily lifestyle, right, we need to have a proper limitation on what are the various basic needs which we have and what are the wants we have. So can you in the comment section let me know what is the main difference between needs and wants and why it is extremely important when we need to understand what we are actually sufficient with. And technologically we must be leaping forward by expanding the nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is minimally polluting to the minimal as possible. Also, when we talk about the rooftop solar projects that we need to do, right, via the Muft Surya Ghar Bijli Yojana, right, then we need to also have to adhere to the solar pump mission that the government is doing via the PM Kusum, right? And also we need to have proper grid upgrades so that the solar energy from the rooftops can actually be fed to the electricity system. We need to also have proper reforms in the grid system too. And at the end of the day, we need to cooperate with various institutions such as the UNFCCC, the IEA and the COP, where we need to present our own Asia related demands. Because when we talk about India, right, India's share in the global CO2 emissions is very low. So we need not pay for these climate change impacts to that high amount that the developed countries aspire us to pay for. Right? Also, when we talk about the inequality, the richest versus poor is 10%. It is 20% higher in India. Correct? So that is why we need to collaborate these matters on the global level. Also, China is with us on this level too. Right? And at the end of the day, from a regional perspective, the ASEAN and SAARC can have a disaster force. We know the SAARC is not fully functional as of now due to the India-Pakistan issue. But maybe from a climate change perspective, we can all collaborate on this platform. So, in your comments, you mentioned the answers to these PYQs because PYQs are very important to know the trends of the examination. As usual, you can use this information to write introduction of this mains practice question in the comments so that I can let you know some of the feedbacks so that you can improve answer writing. Now we'll be moving on to the simplified section. In the Hindu today, we have a very important editorial on the vaccination in the country, mainly on the status of the same. Because we have the welfare schemes for vulnerable sections of the population, we have health related schemes in GS2, we need to focus on this a little bit. Now, when we talk about the article, it is telling that on a global scale from 1980 to 2023, the zero-dose children has decreased. This means these children have not received even one dose of those most dangerous diseases such as measles, polio, tuberculosis and various other 6 diseases including this. So, on a global level, when we talk about the same, 60% unvaccinated kids live in 10 countries and India is at rank 2 after Nigeria. Because simply we need to understand we have so much population, that is maybe one of the reasons. But we have to also understand, mainly if you can look at all these countries, they are either having various conflicts within them or they are having limited resources for vaccination. But with India, this is not the case. Right? So here we need to focus on the main reasons here. Firstly, when we talk about the demographics where we have the lowest vaccination rates, firstly within the Muslim households due to various cultural reasons and various misinformation, they have a vaccine hesitancy. Over a period of time that is also increased, but the issue is still there. After this, we have also various mothers with low education who do not have proper awareness that they must be vaccinating their kids. Also, the poorer families think that their survival needs are more important than preventive needs such as education, such as health and so on. Next, when we talk about the scheduled tribes, because of their remoteness, mainly of the various particularly vulnerable tribal groups in India, you mentioned in the comments how many of them are in the country, and also of the various bureaucratic apathy, the poorer implementation of the government schemes in their remote areas, this is also one of the reasons. But there is a positive scenario that in the rural urban areas, across castes, across genders, these gaps are reducing. Right? Earlier there was a lot of gap between the higher castes and the lower castes in the vaccination rates. Rural areas, male and female, these gaps are reducing. But still we have the issues, right? We have so many numbers of say unvaccinated kids in the country. Firstly, because of the COVID pandemic, the more focus was on COVID vaccination rather than on these 6 diseases and various other diseases. So that is one of the reasons where in 2022, there were 1.1 million zero-dose children in the country, but that has increased, not decreased, increased to 1.44 million in 2023. That means the number of zero-dose children has increased. This is an irony because the target is actually also missing in the country, right? When we talk about that, we have to halve the number of zero dose children from 2019 levels to recent times. Around, we are falling short of 0.7 million children. And because we have to also understand there are structural gaps such as lack of proper ground level implementation, right? And also various lack of training of various hospital staff. And at the end of the day, the primary healthcare centers in the various parts of the country are poorly equipped to deal with such emergencies. So that is why we now need to know that what are the various initiatives that it has been in favor of India when we talk about vaccination. Firstly, we have the universal immunization program that is running in the country from 1985, where the government has told that no one will be going without immunization because it is the most basic thing in the country, that, or say the basic service, that no one will be suffering from polio or tuberculosis or these diseases. That is why from the very childhood, mainly the children below 5 years and mainly the pregnant women and mainly the partially covered children, they were targeted, right? But we did not yet have a proper targeted approach in the universal immunization program. That is why we have the Mission Indradhanush, right, where we are trying to cover the various kinds of say diseases via vaccination. And under the intensified mission, that is Mission Indradhanush 2.0 and 3.0, that was launched mainly 2021 and after. This was mainly targeted as children below 5 years, pregnant women, and those who were left out. So also this was made a part of the COVID vaccination drive. After this, we also have the Electronic Vaccine Intelligence Network to have a unified portal on the data. And also we have various ASHA workers, Anganwadi workers, who are trying to outreach the people and spread awareness of vaccination. And when we talk about the zero dose children in the country, they are mainly present in UP, Bihar, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat. So we need to target on this. Also, the tribal areas in northeastern states such as Mizoram, Nagaland, Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh are home to a lot of numbers of the zero dose children because of their remoteness. The urban slums are also having migrant heavy population, high turnover rates of this kind of say diseases, and we have poor tracking in those regions. And at the end of the day, these particular schemes and benefits are not reaching out to them. So that is why we need to have a way forward. Firstly, we need to target at the micro level, at the district level, where we need to have a disaggregated data of the people who are missing this. Mainly, we will be targeting the children who are below 5 years, who have not done any vaccination as of now. We have to target those partially individuals and also the pregnant women. Next, we need to build community partnerships with religious leaders, community leaders to persuade people and reduce the vaccine hesitancy in the country. We need to also usher in digital tracking using our Aadhaar system, the digital ecosystem, also the Ayushman Bharat health cards, which are extremely important when we talk about the tracking of the peoples here. We need to have a proper urban strategy where we need to drive customized campaigns for various slums, regions, migrant population, construction sites where majority of the informal workers are present, who are carrying with them children who are not vaccinated. Next, we need to also rope in various social media influencers, some film stars maybe, for immunization campaigns, right, to actually nudge the people to taking vaccines. And at the end of the day, we need sustained funding. And here, this is even beyond where the pandemic has ended as of now. We need to extend the vaccination drives. So these are the various things that we need to keep in mind. And again, we have the PYQs from 21 and 2019. You let me know in the comments what are the answers. Now on to the next one. Guys, what we see recently, we have some developing relations between China and India. We have recently also seen how the recent batch of pilgrims are also readying for one of the first trips in recent times to Mansarovar. Now in recent times, we have seen how the electronic sectors, the semiconductor sector has been in the news for the lack of critical minerals as a part of the global supply chain, which China dominates, which India is also acknowledging the same. And that is why in this news, we are going to discover into the various rare earth, their resources in the entire world, and the main reason why India is right now reaching out to China for the same. So when we talk about the strategic minerals and the strategic moves of the countries recently. Firstly, look at the China's dominance in critical minerals and the supply chain of the entire world. When we talk about India, India's rare earth minerals are mainly focused on the monazite sand, which is present mostly in various states. You let me know in the comments which states are there. Look at China, which is dominating 44%, followed by Brazil. When we talk about the processing sector, reserves and everything, China is leading in all aspects here, right? Also, when we talk about the lithium, its processing, nickel refining, cobalt processing, China is leading way ahead. And what is the crisis in recent time is that due to the US-China tariff war in April 2025, over the last few months, China have restricted the supply of critical minerals all across the world as a counter move of the Trump's tariffs, right? Mr. Trump, in the recent times have been very aggressive with reference to the trade war, and maybe China has taken this initiative. Now, India is actually caught in the crossfire, right? Because India is actually not a big producer, not a big refinery, agent here, or not having enough resources. So that is why India is also stuck here. And in 2012 PYQs, in 2012, right, in UPSC has asked this question in 2012. That means rare earth critical minerals have been always in the news. So you can actually read the statement here. Mainly you can find that China has in the past also imposed various restrictions, correct? So I'm not telling you the answer, you let me know in the comments what is the answer. You can take the hint from this here. But mainly what we have to understand, India is acknowledging this crisis and is thinking of taking a long-term strategy on critical minerals. Firstly, as of recent times, India was actually hopeful of positive outcome from talks with China from with reference to rare earth metals. Recently, the first time since Galwan crisis, as of yesterday, the Indian government is sending signals to China that they are actually trying to streamline the global supply chain of rare earth. Now, also when we talk about India reducing dependence on China, correct? India knows that China is a major factor here, but India has also collaborated with countries such as Bolivia, Chile, Argentina to reap benefits of what we know as popularly as the lithium triangle, where we have roughly 60% of the world's stocks of lithium. So based on this, we are trying to collaborate with these countries mainly via the Khanij Videsh India Limited, right, where India is actually trying to partner with these countries. Apart from this, we are actually trying to have domestic mining push in the country. We are trying to explore Argentina, Australia. Also, in 2023, we released a critical minerals list where we identified 30 minerals for self-reliance. Next, we also have the PLI for advanced chemistry cells, extremely important for boosting the lithium ion batteries ecosystem in the country, simply because we are thinking of more production of electric vehicles, electric components in the country. At the end of the day, the global partnerships such as this one, such as with Australia, which are actually we are having in the form of joint ventures for lithium and rare earth mining. Also, India is hopeful of contributing to the US initiative of ICET, which is looking into the dissemination of critical technology, minerals cooperation, right? Also, we are trying to explore Africa, the countries such as Zimbabwe, Congo, for cobalt and nickel, actually because they are very rich in those resources. So that was all for the article, and now we'll be moving on to the next one. Guys, our Home Minister recently made the statements that the Indian languages should be the language of the administration of the day. And here he is not focusing on any one particular language. He is talking about a technology that the government is pushing for since the budget 2024-25. He is talking about a dedicated Indian languages section under the Ministry of Home Affairs, because he believes that in this country, those who speak English will soon feel ashamed because the creation of such a society is not far away. Because we have to understand, in the country where we are talking about inclusivity, diversity, we need to talk about taking the language, or say the linguistic diversity of India forward. In India, we have 22 languages in the 8th schedule of the Constitution. We have 122 major languages and more than 1600 dialects. right, across 28 states. That means we have also the 8 union territories which show the vast linguistic diversity. Now, when we talk about the creation of this language section, before this, let me tell you, according to official language rules, we actually have some regions with various states. When we talk about how the center communicates, the central government communicates with the states. Region A states are Hindi speaking, so the language of center's communication is in Hindi with them, right? This is according to the official language rules, right? Now, region B, that means they are mixed, for example, like West Bengal, Odisha, right, where they are actually sending communication in Hindi or various other languages, mixed languages. So there the center is sending various communication in Hindi or English, right, or Hindi with English. Or finally, there are various states such as the C states, mainly the non-Hindi states such as Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, where they are communicating in only Hindi. Correct? So here, what the key objectives of such a portal under the Ministry of Home Affairs would be, which I am going to tell you in the next one, is we are trying to have linguistic decolonialization. The statements of the Home Minister clearly tell that we need to converse more in Hindi, we need to converse more in Bengali, even we need to converse more in Tamil or Malayalam or various other Indian languages, and not alone in English, because we need to replace English with Indian languages. Next, we also have to respect the linguistic diversity of the states, right? When we talk about the various states in the country, we need to reply to them in their official languages. And at the end of the day, the cognitive liberation, that means as a child, we tend to learn better in our mother tongue than in English, right? And at the end of the day, we also are trying to preserve the language itself. So how it works? It is actually an universal translation system. It is actually partnered by the CDAC, where the CDAC is actually an authority which will be leading AI-driven translation system. This AI-driven translation system will work in such a way. For example, if the Tamil Nadu Chief Minister is writing a communication in Tamil language to the center, so the central government, when it will be replying back to Tamil Nadu government, it will be replying in Hindi only. But this software will be translating the Hindi into readable and proper amount of official Tamil language, right? So this means there will be real-time translation of documents into 22 plus languages. So mainly this is trying to break the English-Hindi binary. Because of recent times we have seen the language imposition debates in South Indian states, and that is why we need to ensure that all states get communication in their official languages, and also we have to maintain the equality here. At the end of the day, this will be coupled with training of the administration, training of the bureaucrats, where they will be undergoing language upskilling so that they can actually contribute to the data training of this AI translation system. And also they will be getting incentives according to their linguistic or multilingual capacity. The bureaucrats also will be getting promotions according to the same. So it's a win-win strategy here. Now in the comment section, let me know, taking cues from this particular infographic, what is the answer to this PYQ? Now on to the next one. The Conference on Financing for Development under the United Nations Development Conference is going to take place in Seville in Spain. Now here, when we talk about the relevance of this topic for GS2, it is extremely important that we know about any international institution. Now, the global leaders here will be accumulating in once in a decade opportunity to participate in Seville, who is located in Spain, in the southern Spain region, as you can see, to focus on climate finance justice, right, debt reform all around the world, innovative funding tools, and also platform for action, where they are trying to gather at the Conference on Financing for Development. Now this is the only fourth such conference ever, because it is held once in 10 years, right, where the leaders will be formally adopting a 38-page document which is not binding here, which will be negotiated and agreed upon already before the conference which is taking place, right. So here this will be known as a Seville commitment, but it is not legally binding. It is actually a political commitment. What commitments? Mainly on climate justice financing, Firstly, the global solidarity levels, that means they are talking about taxing the super rich on their yacht, on their various say jets, private jets and so on. So we are taxing the billionaires, we are actually thinking of taxing the billionaires and bringing that money for the climate change. Also we are talking about debt pause clauses, because many developing countries, you know, out of desperation, out of poverty levels, out of development aspirations, they have taken loans and they're having it very difficult to pay it back. So for these aspects, for some special causes, we can actually have debt restructuring. We can restructure the debt and we can actually tell them to pause the debt for a period of time. Also, we are talking about innovative financial tools such as using the special drawing rights, right, of the IMF, and we are also talking about using the SDR for various funding tools for those countries which actually generally need the funding for. And we also are thinking of having multilateral developmental banks, right, all around the world for blended finance in the various parts of the world. At the end of the day, there also will be a savvy platform of new alliances and coalition for various aspects. Now, what is at stake here? We have to understand that in the entire world, that the global financial assistance from the rich world is dropping, right? As you can see, right, it has dropped by 7% per year and may drop by 23% because the rich nations has slashed their budget by 7% when we talk about the money that they give to the developing economies or the least developed countries, right, according to the OECD report. Also, there is a climate urgency, as we have seen in the second topic, right, due to the extreme weather events, rising debt. Also, these countries are not having any money to pay for the climate mitigation and finance. We need to focus on that too. Also, the financing gap is at around $4 trillion per year. And that is why we are thinking of having solidarity levies on private jets, yachts of billionaires. So the money that we can tax here, we can use for finance. Also, the debt has boomed, right? The countries, the developing countries are struggling to have interest payments, right? And they're paying more on interest payments than on priority services such as health, education, and so on. And here, this is attributing to around 3 billion people, and here China is actually, according to various experts, the main devil here, where they are actually trapping African nations, Sri Lanka and various other countries in debt trap. At the end of the day, Mr. Trump in the US is fighting against the entire world, right? His own nuances on climate change and gender related clauses in this savvy action plan is very surprising. And what is more surprising is that the US will not be participating at all. But some of the countries are also thinking if they are not participating, it is good for us because we can have a constructive discussion, because Mr. Trump loves to have non-constructive ones. Now on to the last one. Guys, here in this last article, we are going to understand the basics of registered unrecognized political parties in the country, because according to the Election Commission of India, there are too many of these parties as of now, and we have to delist them because of some concerns. Firstly, we need to understand one very factual thing, nothing too much to understand here, just for your complete revision. We need to know the actual status of national party recognition and state party recognition. So if you are fulfilling any one condition such as 6% of votes in 4 states plus 4 Lok Sabha seats, or you should be getting 2% of Lok Sabha seats, that is 11 out of 543 from 3 plus states, or state party in 4 plus states. So if you are actually accorded a national party. But on the other hand, you have also to fulfill various other conditions to become a state party. You can fulfill any of the conditions. Now, when we talk about the registered unrecognized political party, here we are actually talking about those 2,500 plus, right, those parties who are registered, right, according to the section 29A of the RP Act, right, where they have to actually register with the Election Commission of India, but they do not have proper electoral results. That means they do not fulfill this kind of conditions, right, or they do not get enough kind of votes. Correct. So these are either newly registered or they failed to meet those vote or seat thresholds. That is why when we have to understand that these particular parties, they generally get common symbols, they generally get 20 star campaigners for them, they also get exemptions for income taxes, right, according to Income Tax Act, but that is actually one of the reason. Less than 1/3 of the parties here, they do not contest the elections because they are maybe misusing the income in the name of tax exemptions, or sometimes there can be serious instances of international role, right, in funding that leads to money laundering too. So this is where we have to understand the main problem here, why ECI is trying to delist these parties as of now. So this was the end of the discussion. I thank you all for your very patient qualities. Now please do attempt the quiz which is following up here. Till we meet again, all the best. Best of luck. Thank you.